Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. But I'm be going into this whole thing with so-called Satan rebelling against, God, as you people say. And just all this different confusion in these doctrines. So I'm gonna get into this article right here that breaks it down very good. It says at the top, let me just get straight into it. It says the final Old Testament era influence upon, Jewish will be Israelite thinking, because this word Jewish is a hijack for Israelites. It says Israelite thinking about the devil was that of the Greeks. It says their idea that there was a Tartarus, a place of darkness under the earth for the wicked. It says the asphodel fields, a kind of purgatory, and the Elysian fields, a kind of heaven for the righteous, and that goes back into Roman mythology and Greek mythology, etc. It says was picked up by Israelites, not Judaism. It says despite the fact that it contradicted the plain biblical revelation about the grave, hell. So when you actually go into the word hell, it means the grave. And it can represent a condition, so on and so forth, but it wasn't known as a fiery subterranean place that you know today. That's all a myth that was created. And this stuff goes back into Greek and Roman mythology, back to Babylon, so on and so forth. It says, let me get back into this. It says, despite the fact that it contradicted plain biblical revelation about the grave, hell, the state of being dead, was outlined in section -2, section 2-5, Salakia. It says, and the Greeks had multiple legends of cosmic combat between the gods. It says some of them, like Phineas, taking the form of a serpent, and often was the sequence of a rebellion being cast out, as with Prometheus and Zeus, a pantheon. This would all intermesh with the other ideas that the Israelites were picking up of a personal Satan. It says the horns and hairy features of Greek god Pan, the trident of Poseidon, and the wings of Hermes all became incorporated in the common Israelite idea of Satan. Being that this in turn influenced Christian misunderstandings and images of this legendary being. It says no wonder Oregon and early apostate Christian fathers were accused by their critics such as Caecilius of merely adopting pagan legends in this area of devil. Let's go right here. The second paragraph. It says the uninspired apocryphal book of Enoch. The book of Enoch is bugged out. And that's where you Israelites, you Jays get this from. It says the uninspired apocryphal book of Enoch, it says features the Israelite story of the watcher angels being imprisoned in the valleys of the earth after they supposedly slept with the daughters of men. It's all a myth. Clearly, it was taken from Greek myths. You hear this? This was the fate of the Titans after Zeus defeated them. And it recalls the imprisonment of children are onerous in valleys and punishment. But these Israelite myths about angels came to be absorbed into popular Christianity. You hear that? So let me go here. It says 2 Peter 1:16, for we have not followed cunningly devised fables, cunningly devised stories, myths, tall tales, when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Lord Yahushua HaMashiach, but what are witnesses of his majesty. So what you've been taught in Christianity is Satan rebelled against, as you know, as God, and he was kicked out of heaven with a band of angels. And this is all nothing but confusion. And what time was he kicked out of heaven? See, it's so much pressure points that we can go into to expose the madness of Christianity. It says right here at the AI overview. It says Satan rebellion against God occurred at an unspecified time. You hear this? But after the creation of the angels and before the temptation of so-called Adam and Eve in Genesis chapter 3. But most interpretation places it either during creation week or shortly after. So you have to explain Job chapter 1 and 2 if this is true, but this is nothing but a lie. See, this is nothing but confusion. But they got this from Milton's Paradise Lost. Read this again. It says, with most interpretation placing it either during creation week or shortly after, but before humanity's fall. The Bible doesn't give a precise date, but scriptural clues. See, they going off. They talking about Isaiah 14, which was talking about the king of Babylon, which is talking about America. You know what I'm saying? And Ezekiel chapter 28 is talking about the king of Tyre, or the king of Tyrus. It says symbolically describe the powerful fall of Lucifer, Satan from heaven. And that's what you've been taught. And I hate reading this garbage, but we have to read it to you so you can understand what's going on. But it's nothing but confusion. But that's where they get this from. But hold up. According to Christianity, if he rebelled the first week of creation, well, how did this jump off? It don't make sense. Job chapter 1 and 8. And Yahweh said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job? But I thought, according to your Christian doctrine, that he rebelled against so-called God in the book of Genesis, the first week of creation. Don't make sense. It says that there is none like him. In matter of fact, let's go to the whole chapter. And you Christians on a real dumb, stupid, remedial level. Let's go here. 6. It says, now there was a day when the sons of God. So Satan, as you know, is Satan. That's really not his real name. That name Satan just means adversary. He's a son of God. He's the son of the Most High. He was created to do the Most High work. Came to present themselves before Yahweh. Anytime you see Lord in all caps, that's his name. It says, and Satan came also among them. But I thought he rebelled against God, as you people say, and he took 1/3 of the angels. It don't make sense, right? Job 1 and 7. It says, and Yahweh said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Yahweh by Hashem Yahushua. It said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. So doing my job, going from the spiritual realm into the earthly realm, doing what the Most High wants him to do. So basically he was saying, I'm doing my job. Job 1 and 8. And Yahweh said unto Satan. So if they supposed to be beefing, come on. Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feared Yahweh by Hashem Yahushua and eschewed evil. So the Most High say, look, Satan, I got a mission for you. You know, have you considered my servant Job? Right? Let's go to 9. It says, and Satan answered Yahweh and said unto him, do Job fear Yahweh for naught? It says, Job not 1 and 10. Has not thou made an hedge about him and about his house and about all that have on every side? Thou hast blessed the works of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. So basically, let's keep going. It says, but put forth thy hand now and touch all that he had, and he will curse thee to thy face. Let's go to 12. This is the point. 12. Job 1 and 12. And Yahweh said unto Satan, behold, so this is so-called God, as you know, talking to what you know as Satan. It says, behold, all that he had is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of Yahweh to do, basically he went out to go do his assignment. So the Most High said, don't Matter of fact, let me show you something. Give me 1 second. Jump back into this Job 2 and 6. It says, and Yahweh said unto Satan, behold, he is in thy hand, but save his life. So don't kill him. Let me show you that's what that means. So the Most High gave Satan instructions, and Satan said, okay, yes, sir. Job 2 and 6. It says in the Bible, means God granted, Yahweh granted Satan permission. So he gave him an order. So that means Satan is subjugated to the Most High. So it ain't no rebellion going on here. It says Yahweh granted Satan permission to test Job further by afflicting his body, but with a crucial boundary. So the Most High said, go do what you got to do, but don't do this. Satan must spare Job's life. It says showing God's ultimate control over Satan. I can shut down a lesson on this, right? So Satan is to tempt us. He ain't this doing his own thing. He rebelled and all this myth stuff. This is what you've been taught, but that's not true. In Ezekiel chapter 28, let's go here because they use this to say this talking about Satan and all this. It said Ezekiel 28 condemns the prince of Tyre for extreme arrogance, as his immense wealth and power led to him claim divine status. I am God. So it was actually talking about Ezekiel chapter 28, because they'll say this talking about Satan, who was talking about the king of Tyre, the prince of Tyre. And Isaiah 14 is talking about the king of Babylon. And I've done lessons on that. It ain't talking about Satan, as you know. Again, these are myths that was interjected in this Christianity, and that's why Jake is all confused. Let's go here. In this lesson, so it was like, so much I had to put together that I didn't really know how I was going to do it. But I guess, the Spirit do what it do. So ain't no rebellion against the Most High. And right here, I wanted to go to some key points, pressure points. Right here, Ezekiel chapter 28 and 12, where I just read Ezekiel chapter 28. It says, this is the strongest armament Christians use. You were a signet of perfection. You were in the Eden, in the garden of God. You were an anointed garden cherub. Historically, this was a lament over the king of Tyre. You hear this? It says so many Christians conclude this describes a spiritual being, a cherub. It says, again, interpretation is not labeled biography. So this is not what that was talking about. But all this madness came in through these Edomites. And Jake, our people that was in power back then in the so-called dark ages, they was going off. It says right here, what the Bible never says. The Bible never says Satan was an archangel. The Bible doesn't never say Satan was God's right-hand angel. The Bible never says Satan led worship. You people say that too. He was over the music, completely out of your mind. The Bible never says Satan's name was Lucifer as a proper name. Right here. But I think you get the point, you know what I'm saying? I didn't want to go too in on it. Right here, let's go to Isaiah right here at the 2. It says Isaiah 14, 12 through 15. It says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn? This passage is explicitly about the king of Babylon. That cuts all that Christian madness when y'all go to these certain scriptures and think it's talking about the spiritual demon Satan, which that ain't even much his name. The name Satan means adversary. But hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Hala Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak, Quadash, Shalom.